Alrighty, welcome back. And we are finishing up our series. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the composite chart. This is the Davison style chart, the composite chart of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, as a chart by itself, and also how this relationship affects both these individuals separately. And we'll also finish this video by looking at the marriage chart, which I really hope and pray to God an astrologer was not responsible for picking the date and time for. What were they thinking? Okay, so composite chart. So here are some things about a composite chart, and this is, obviously only my professional opinion. Your mileage may vary. And in all things and always in life, there is no one true way. There are only better ways. And ultimately, the things that we do, we have to do in ways that work for us, and help move us forward. So there you go. All right. So with composite charts, a composite chart is in theory a snapshot of the relationship as its own entity. Okay, separate from me as an individual and you as an individual. Now we're looking at the vehicle called a relationship within which we're both sitting side by side and having or participating in this experience with. It gets a little out there, but hopefully you get the idea, right? Another way to look at this, and maybe a better way to explain it, is this, right? So you have Bob and you have Sue. Bob is one person with his family, he's another person with his friends, and he's another person with his kids. He's also another person with Sue. This does not mean that Bob is not himself with any of those people. Bob is always himself, but in these relationships, different parts of Bob's personality and different aspects of Bob and his essential nature come to the forefront in the context of that relationship. Bob as a father is not the same thing as Bob as the partner, or Bob as the son, or Bob as the buddy at the barbecue. These are all different facets of Bob's person that come to the forefront depending on the relationship vehicle he happens to be in at the time. So when we look at composites, the composite tells us about the relationship and this vehicle, and how sturdy this vehicle is, and what are some of the pronounced characteristics of this particular vehicle. A composite. So in theory, a composite may or may not be able to make or break a relationship. In reality, synastry, the synastry between two people's charts will always determine how successful a relationship can be, because you cannot change your essential nature. You are who you are always. And as you grow and evolve and become more of who you are essentially, okay, all of this is laid out in the chart, and we can kind of see what we're working with or where we're striving to go and who we're striving to become. So that blueprint, as it sets up next to somebody else's, as it's supported or challenged by the other person's essential nature, these things will not change. They will only become more and more deep and rich and fixed in their expressions. We become more true to ourselves. So the synastry, looking at the two natal charts compared to each other, will always tell the tale about the health, longevity, and prospects for a long-term successful relationship. A composite only tells us what is going to come to the forefront and what is uniquely characteristic about this particular relationship as opposed to someone else's. So, Mika's relationship with Jim is going to be completely different, hopefully, than Mika's relationship with Saul. Okay, these are two different people she's having two different relationships with, and she is going to find that some parts of her personality are more activated with Jim, and other parts of her personality are more activated with Saul. And there may be experiences that she's having with Jim that she never had to deal with Saul. These are all the ways relationships are different from person to person, even though we are always the same person. So composite charts tell us about the relationship itself, in theory. So with composite charts, we don't look at signs. And I know some people do. So just so we know, moving forward, this is how I do these things. Now, other people may do them differently, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Because I am never wrong. No. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong or that they're wrong. It just means that this is how I do things because this is what works for me. Okay, so with composite charts, we don't look at the signs because signs are basically mathematical. It is shorthand for a mathematical notation about a position, in the sky. It's not an actual sign. Anyway, blah blah blah. Not using signs. With that said, I may or may not use houses, depending on whatever. And I don't get a lot of detail when I look at composites because the meat of the information that I should be getting will be coming from the synastry charts. Because ultimately, we are who we are, and everything we do is about becoming more of who we are. All right, so Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. So this is their composite chart. First thing, right off the bat, we've got Venus and Mars conjunct. Wow, kapow, hot sex, great chemistry. Nature and biology has played their trump card with these two. So there would have been an instant connection, and the minute those two fused bodies, at least momentarily, that would have basically put the signature on the dotted line in terms of karmic fate. This does not necessarily guarantee that they'll have a successful relationship, but it does guarantee that it would have been very hard for them not to end up in a relationship, all things considered. Okay, now with this, I don't use houses, but I will use the ascendant and the descendant. Okay, so the ascendant is Taurus and the descendant is Scorpio. Wow, look at that. Venus and Mars. Yes, baby cakes. The first and seventh house ruler of the composite chart are conjunct, honey. And they're in the signs or the planets. They're involving the planets. Pure, physical, powerful attraction. So this was definitely a relationship that's going to feel like it was meant to be. And in many ways it was. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is the be-all, end-all relationship for the rest of their life. So keep that in mind. Relationships serve a purpose. Not all of them are meant to last a lifetime. Okay. So with this, what we also see in this chart, okay, we're going to look at the sun and the moon now. So the sun and the moon have a lot to do with purpose of the relationship and the ability to be emotionally comfortable in a relationship. So the sun in this chart trines Saturn. So there's a stabilizing influence in this relationship. And it also means the relationship should be very easy for the relationship to settle into some form of routine and supportive, stabilizing kind of partnership. Okay, so that in and of itself is extremely promising because they're not going to be at loggerheads as far as their routines go and what's important. So for the most part, everything that they do has a lot to do with everything that they do is going to be based on a sympathetic and unspoken natural agreement about what's important and how things need to get done. So in terms of schedules and organization and structures, and timelines, they should both be on the same page mostly all the time. Not 100% time, but certainly mostly all the time as far as those things go. The next thing that we look at is the moon. So the moon, okay, is trining that Mars. Now, technically, it's kind of trine Venus too. It's a little wide, but it's there. But definitely with Mars. So the moon has a lot to do with our emotional needs and our emotional nature and our ability to feel comfortable in a relationship, not constantly feel jumpy and anxious and, uncomfortable. And people who've been in very short-term relationships that started out really well and then just get really awkward really quickly will understand that feeling, right? So they look good in the beginning and you just felt like you just really couldn't relax into it. But with Moon and Mars together like this and trined, they work well together. So there's a tremendous amount of sympathetic, active behavior. So their actions support each other. And this combined with that Sun-Saturn trine also makes this very easy for them to build a solid structure within which they can coexist with each other. This is extremely important in relationships. Now, if we move this out and we give it a little bit more of a stretch, as Venus is close to that Mars, and we say the moon is an out-of-sign trine with Venus, what this also indicates is that in terms of their aesthetics and the things that bring them peace and pleasure in life, they will also mostly be sympathetic, although it's not necessarily so much sympathy as much as tolerance, a tremendous amount of tolerance for the little things that are very different between them. With the moon trining Venus and Mars like this, but especially Mars, there's again an emphasis, in this particular case, there's also an emphasis on children, interestingly enough. Now, the moon in this chart, the moon in this chart rules the fourth house. Okay, so, and it's in its own sign, so it's very, very strong, even though we're not using signs. So the moon ruling the fourth house has a lot to do with motherhood and children and procreation and all that sort of stuff. Mars over here in that seventh house has a lot to do with coming together, okay, for the purpose of making a formal arrangement with which to build a home. Okay, the sun rules that fifth house, and the sun is squaring Saturn, or squaring. The sun is trining Saturn, which is also the ruler of the 11th and the 10th. So the 10th house has to do with public status and the things that we do as part of our social obligation. The 11th house has a lot to do with hopes and dreams and wishes and personal things. So there would be a natural desire between the two of them to have children, and this, because the sun rules that fifth house, this would make this absolutely a priority. So one of the things that I would look at is the possibility that the purpose of this relationship, above and beyond, love and sex and hormones and romance and all that lovely stuff, the driving force that took this from a relationship to a marriage was the overriding priority that involves having heirs, having children, creating a family with children. So that may be the thing that really drove this to, the point where it's like, okay, let's go from having a love affair to having a full and committed marriage so we can build a home and have children properly. One of the other things you're going to notice in this composite chart is there's a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Sagittarius, but basically it's a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That Jupiter-Uranus conjunction trines Venus, okay, which is part of the relationship angles. That Jupiter-Uranus conjunction trining Venus does two things. One, this kind of echoes this theme about having breaks and separation. So there may be physical separation in this relationship, but also those physical breaks in the relationship may have a lot more to do with the need for giving each other plenty of space. So they're going to need room to do their own thing, have their own activities separate from each other. So this relationship will have built into it lots of tolerance for extended separations and having independent lives, inside the relationship. Now, I don't know how this is necessarily going to play out, given the conversation that we just had about Meghan's Uranus opposing Harry's moon in his fourth house. So it will be interesting to see what this actually looks like in practice. But as a general thing, they're very tolerant of giving each other breathing room, and not being up underneath each other's feet. Also, too, with Jupiter, because Jupiter and Uranus is very tolerant comparing. It's just a great place to have it. The other thing is that with Venus trining Jupiter and Uranus, and Venus being part of the relationship angles, this could also mean that this relationship has a lot to do, and also Mars, if you use a wide conjunction, has a lot to do with forward thinking or somehow making a contribution socially to the greater good, as it were. Now, Saturn, again, we got this wide conjunction. Saturn is with Pluto in that sixth house. So there will be a reformation, oh my lord, a reformation of routines and health and things of that nature. There's a whole lot of stuff between the two of them that's going to get addressed and fixed, like fixed in a big way, that will come as a result of this relationship. And because Pluto is involved, this could be something that's much bigger than just the two of them. So this could lead to situations or incidents that have everything to do with research that is begun on their behalf, but ends up benefiting a whole lot of other people. Saturn and Pluto are in mutual reception. Saturn is the old ruler of Libra. Venus is the ruler of Libra. Saturn is the old ruler of Libra. So it's exalted in Libra, so we're still going to use it. So we'll see what that is. We'll see what that is. Now, Saturn, in this particular case, rules, again, the 10th and the 11th house, and Pluto rules that seventh. So there's something about their relationship that's very, and reformations that come with it as far as their health and hygiene and physical things like that, that are going to have a lot more impact on the people at large, not just them individually. So it would be interesting to see what that is about. Not really sure, and I'm not going to speculate on that because literally it could be anything. So I'm more interested in letting it play itself out so we can find out as it happens. Okay, so, and that's pretty much it. I mean, we can do some stuff with the planets and houses. So, for instance, the moon in fourth house of the composite chart, home, hearth, and family is a very, very big deal for those two. It will be a source of focus in this relationship. So, this is very much about settling into a home and cohabitating, and building a home together and having privacy. Mercury in the 10th house doesn't really make any aspect, which is kind of interesting. It's like a wide sextile to Jupiter and Uranus, so there should be an easy free flow of communication and ideas shared between them, which makes it very satisfying for people who have more mental needs, right? And she, with all that third house stuff, she definitely needs somebody who stimulates her mentally. The sun in the 11th. Oh, sorry, I almost missed that. The sun in the 11th squaring that Jupiter-Uranus, right? So Sun squaring Jupiter-Uranus can be challenging because Sun square Uranus needs tons of personal freedom. Sun square Jupiter does not know where the limits are, so it just goes and goes and goes and goes. So some of the challenges in this relationship is going to be learning and keeping adherence to mutually agreed upon limits in everything. Including separations, because Jupiter-Uranus does like its freedom. So that Sun-Jupiter-Uranus square, also there's going to be a lot of conversation about where the limits of our freedom are in this relationship. So, and our independence. So that will be something that is constantly coming up and challenging the identity of the relationship. What kind of relationship are we actually having here? Is this a relationship? Like, and if this is a relationship, and this is the kind of relationship that we're having, like, where are the limits before this relationship morphs into something completely different? These are the kind of conversations we can expect with that particular aspect. Venus and Mars together in that 12th house, lots and lots of privacy, private time, very intense, deep, psychological stuff happening when it comes to intimacy. So we're not going to get into that too much. We're going to let them have their privacy, even in astrology. The moon, we did that. Saturn, Pluto, we did that. Jupiter, Uranus in the 7th house, we just did that. Neptune is in the 8th, and not really doing a whole lot. So Neptune squares Mars, okay, from the 8th to the 12th. And again, there's, the whole issue of blind spots, but also there's a very dreamy, fantastical quality to the intimate or physical side of the relationship. So this plays out in a couple of different ways. One, timing could be off between them. So one runs hot while the other running cold. So, finding that time and place when they're both wanting to be intimate in the same intensity and level and frequency may be a bit challenging for them. Also, with Mars squaring Neptune, there's some concern about, again, limits. Where are our limits? So role-play and fantasy is very, very good with this aspect. Staying in a committed monogamous relationship where you're not doing anything with anybody else, that's a little more challenging, because there's always the tendency with this particular aspect to kind of forget that you're, in a committed monogamous relationship. We will see how that goes. The nodes, we've got the north node in the 2nd and the south node in the 8th. So again, in this particular situation with them, this relationship is very much about values. So it's not just, people often say the 2nd and 8th house has to do with money, but that's not really the case. The 2nd and 8th house has a lot to do with values and our ability to support and be supported by other people. So in this particular case, because this is a very public couple, there's their values, their core values as a couple to themselves, and then there are the values that are required of them as part of society. So the north node in the 2nd house has everything to do with all their challenges in relationships about drawing the line between what's expected of them from other people and what is essential and true to them as a couple and adhering to their own values in the face of conflicting pressures from the outside world to adopt the outside world's values. So it will be, again, it will be very interesting to see how this plays out. Okay, so this is the composite chart and Harry and Meghan's chart. The inside chart is the composite. The middle ring, all of this, that is Prince Harry, and the outer ring is Meghan. So I'm not going to do like 26 of these charts. We're just going to look at how this composite impacts their personal planets. So, because relationships, remember, relationships do change which parts of ourselves get expressed. So it will activate certain parts of ourselves and will suppress other parts of ourselves depending on the relationship that we're having, right? And you can have a relationship with Jill and you can have a relationship with Tanisha. These are not going to bring out the same parts of personality. I mean, they might if you're a brick, but more often than not, different parts of you come to the forefront. Some things stay the same, other things change. All right, so the first thing we're looking for are direct connections. So we've got the composite Jupiter and Uranus right here on Harry's Uranus, right? Where is this Mars? Mars is at 16. Is it doing anything? Oh, no, that's her Mars. Sorry. Let's stick with the middle charts. So let's start with Mercury, which isn't really doing anything by itself in a composite, right? So this is the composite Mercury. Let me get rid of that. All right. Now, what is this doing? Well, the first thing we're saying is it is making an opposition to Meghan's sun. So this Mercury really lights up issues that have to do with, again, we're back to the issue of her identity. Who am I? What is my life about? What is my purpose? Mercury means there's going to be a lot of conversation in this relationship that are specifically focused on her and her identity and her self-perception. What else is this Mercury doing? So it's making a trine to his Venus. Ooh, look at this. It's a square to his Saturn. And it's a sextile to his Neptune, or his Uranus. And it is a sextile to his Mars. Interesting. So, one of the things, it makes quincunxes in her chart. So, one of the things that's interesting when we look at this, right? Let me do this in different colors. Is this Mercury, this unaspected Mercury, which is pretty much mute in this composite chart, is really active in Harry's chart. Look at this, right? So the first thing, Mercury in trine to Venus, so he's going to be very comfortable expressing himself in this relationship. So this is a good thing. And the conversations and the communications and this free flow of ideas, this is going to be very pleasing for him because it is his Venus in Libra. And also a lot of his values and his aesthetic taste, because it is Venus, will dominate the communications of this relationship and also the focus, the direction that this relationship goes in. Now, here we've got Mars and Uranus sextiling that Mercury. So again, Mars is a lot to our focus on our direction, and Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So Harry is going to play a very strong, dynamic role in not only the communications within the relationship, but also the direction and decisions and schedules that are involved with this relationship. So he is not the puppet master, but he is certainly the controlling force in terms of a lot of the day-to-day directional stuff. Now, here's what's interesting. Are you looking at this? Look. The composite Mercury, let me get rid of this. The composite Mercury is squaring his natal Saturn. Remember, his natal Saturn, just like his natal moon, is extremely important, right? Because it's a very powerful player in the chart. With composite Mercury squaring his natal Saturn, there's going to be a lot of conversation in this relationship that have everything to do with obligations, right? And responsibilities and debts, and not just debts personally, but also debts to society. And doing the right thing not just on a personal level, but on literally large scale levels like legacy, right? So when this Mercury and Saturn gets activated through Aquarius and Scorpio, it's not just about, listen, it's the principle of the thing, and we have to do this thing because this is what it looks like to other people, and it's important that other people perceive it this way because la 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 la. This is not about ego. This is very much about a much, much bigger picture that spans generations and entire large groups of people, and the direction and that things go based on perceptions. So there's a lot of weight that is going to factor into the communication and the directions, choices in this relationship that are absolutely going to have to do with his Saturn stuff. So his Saturn in the Scorpio and his legacy, not hers, is going to be everything in terms of how this relationship is coordinated. It goes decisions that it needs to make, schedules, priorities, all that sort of stuff. So Harry is the linchpin or compass in terms of this relationship and how this has to go if this is gonna work. And here we go. Like, look at this. While it's doing this, it's opposing her first house sun, right? So all of this stuff, as far as the relationship and the directions the relationship has to go in, and the way things have to get done, the schedules, and the communications, everything, he's the driving force behind that, and all of this is going to challenge her sense of identity. So her need for identity, her sense of identity, her perception of herself, her performer nature. Again, this is an echo, so it's supported. All of this is going to come under the gun in this relationship and be seriously challenged. This is going to be challenging at best. This is going to be challenging for her because she's going to be at a disadvantage. She will have no real strength in this relationship in that regard. So she literally is going to have to, deal with it or get out. There's not really, honestly, there's not really a lot of compromise here. Okay. Also, as we get through this, what else we got here? So we've got that Saturn Pluto in late Libra, early Scorp. All right. So this right here is going to make a nice sextile to Harry's Jupiter. Now, we're not using these outer planets so much, and the reason we're not using them mostly is because, again, they're generational planets. So whatever is affecting one, the other one's going to feel too. It's not that notable in terms of a personal relationship. The only way we would use that is if they were significant in their natal chart, or if for whatever reason it was something significant here. But for the most part, right now, we're not going to consider. They're not giving us any useful information. So the composite Saturn Pluto that we were looking at in that sixth house, remember we were talking about how routines are going to be disrupted, and something to do with fixing or reforming or repairing something that has to do with health and hygiene and routines for them, but would benefit a whole lot of other people, right? This will sextile his Jupiter. Now, Jupiter in Capricorn has a lot to do with our ancestors and our lineage. So there may be something that comes up as a result of, and also here, sorry, that's all of that. Has a lot to do with lineage and family lines. So there may be something that comes up that's a genetic thing that gets examined, that only comes to light as a result of this relationship, that they end up doing research on that ends up benefiting everybody or something like that. The other thing that it could possibly be with this sextile is this offers the opportunity for Harry's dreams and visions and about legacy and the things that he's leaving behind. This could offer him finally the opportunity to really set those wheels in motion. So the thing about it is, while we know that Harry would only look for a partner who would support his desire for legacy and his need to leave behind something of value to the world, in terms of improving existing conditions, that doesn't necessarily mean the relationship will allow that. We can often want things for our partner, but in practice, we may not necessarily be that person who's able to facilitate that for them or with them. In this particular case, with this relationship, it may very well be, luckily, that this relationship will be a vehicle that helps facilitate that, because that is a sextile and it's a supportive aspect. So we are good with that. We like that. Let's look at this Venus-Mars over here. Remember that sexy Venus-Mars between those two that makes them, compels them to be together. Okay, so do we have anything at all that is close to or involves late degrees of water signs or early degrees of fire signs? Well, yes. And again, we're back to blind spots. Look at this. So this relationship, okay, is hitting on all cylinders. Harry's idealism, his optimism, his romanticism, his visions about what's moving forward in the world and what's important, because these are sextiles. Or no, sorry, these are squares, so they're really exaggerating it. The challenge, unfortunately, is because Mars is squaring his Neptune. The composite Mars, the relationship, is squaring his Neptune. Harry may be more love-struck by the sex than he realizes. So they must have some atomic chemistry between them to make him literally go off the deep end. But I suppose, I mean, we've seen it. We know people who have been love-struck. And literally stopped thinking clearly because it was just, the chemistry was so amazing. Now, of course, the question is, what does this do to her, and does it do anything, right? Questions. So when we look at her chart, well, see, and here's the thing, we're not really seeing it in her chart. So this Venus-Mars conjunction in the composite that makes this relationship feel so fated and so compelling, and certainly very compelling for him. Good Lord, he feels like a literally hit by Cupid's bows over and over, and arrows over and over and over again. Well, the only thing that it does to her, right, is it's opposing that Moon, Saturn, Jupiter. Now remember how critical and important that Moon, Saturn, Jupiter is in her chart, right? And how it is, the integrity of her behavior in her relationships has everything to do with whether she gets this life correct, with a free pass later or not. With Venus and Mars opposing that, this literally highlights or puts a spotlight on that Moon, Saturn, Jupiter issue, okay? There is no way to tell how this is going to play out, because this is a character issue for her. These are choices she has to make every single day she's in a relationship with this particular person because of this aspect between the composite chart and her natal. What we can say for sure is that the pressure is on. So the pressure to do the right thing, the pressure to be a better person, the pressure to not manipulate, the pressure to rise above that petty nonsense that she has this gift for, letting other people take care of her, as it were. And listen, it's not a bad gig if you can get it, but in her particular case, it comes so easy, she's really got to guard against it. And in this relationship, she really has to guard against it because she will get burned. So there, and again, with Harry's natal chart, this is not somebody to trifle with in the first place. So, integrity, all those issues of integrity and principles and values and sterling character are absolutely highlighted in this relationship for her. So all that stuff she may have spent her entire life getting away with not dealing with, or addressing in terms of character flaws. Well, sweetheart, have we got a new game for you to play? And that game is called Have a Seat at the Table, because now it's time to get real about stuff. Stuff just got real. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. And again, this reinforces and echoes stuff that we've seen elsewhere in the natal chart. And this is the thing with, chart comparisons and stuff. You can find 100,000 things in the chart, but ultimately what we're looking for, like music, we're looking for the dominant notes. Like we can't spend all our time listening to all the little teeny tiny background notes and instruments. They're all there, they're all vital, and they all play a part, but it's the dominant notes and the dominant instruments that we're hearing, and those are the ones that we have to be able to identify and figure out and predict what they're doing and how they're going to interact with each other. So, there is that, my friends. All right, now the composite moon is at 26 Cancer. Is this doing anything? Composite moon is here. All right, so it is making a sextile to Harry's sun, so this relationship is very comfortable for him, which we would hope if he's planning to marry the girl. It is also sextile his moon, so again, he's feeling like this is a relationship where he can finally relax and be himself, which is awesome. We should all have this feeling. Is it doing anything in her chart? Moon at 26 Cancer is not doing anything except. All right, so that's Harry. Let's get rid of that for a second. So with her, and remember, we're not using outer planets unless there's something significant or important about them. In her chart, the only thing the composite moon or the relationship moon is doing is trying her Uranus. And remember, her Uranus is in the 5th house. This is all sort of whirlwinds, completely out of the norm sort of relationship for her. Very exciting, very compelling, because Uranus attractions are very electrifying, right? Well, here we go. Moon is squaring Pluto. And remember, Pluto in her chart, what up over here, is in her 4th house. All these charts. Right? Or 5th house, right? No, 4th. So here's Meghan Markle's chart. Her Pluto is in that 4th house. Right? So this composite moon scoring Pluto in the 4th house means that she is going to undergo radical changes in terms of her understanding of herself and literally the roots from which she has come from. So it's not like fairy tale where she's going to get married to the prince and get the glass slipper and she's going to live happily ever after. Oh, no. Moon Pluto hard aspects are literally psychotherapy, with people who just will not give you rest or let you off the hook. So she's going to be forced, as a result of this relationship, to re-examine everything, literally from childhood up, maybe even prenatally when she was in womb, that led her to become the person that she is, that caused her to believe the things that she believed. Really, everything she thought she knew about reality and herself is going to be challenged and literally set in a state of upheaval, and she will not be the same person when this is over. This could also be power plays that kick in, because we do have it's Uranus and Pluto, and this could also be, I hate to say it because he is supported by this relationship and she is not, this could also be her having her ass handed back to her if she plays up and doesn't act with the integrity that's required of her from that stellium in Libra she carries. So we'll see. This is going to be an extremely challenging relationship for her, so I hope she's up for the task. He, on the other hand, seems to be very comfortable, and again, he's, there's this whole, blinded by very love struck for him. So he can go a long time on the fence of what he thinks this relationship is until he's, unfortunately set in a position where he has no choice but to address it if it is not what he thinks it is. So hopefully she will live up to the requirements of this relationship. Because we like Harry and we like Meghan, but we definitely like Harry, so we don't want anything to happen to him. Let's see, let's composite to the needle. Let's see what else we got here. And the wedding chart. All right, so now this is this is the part where we go, what on earth were they thinking? And we hope and pray to God that they did not actually use an astrologer to pick this chart. Because if this had been the medieval times, doing charts for royalty, the astrologer would be dead by now. Okay, so wedding charts or marriage charts. So, again, just like a composite chart, this can tell us a lot about how the relationship's going to go. Now, you might say to yourself, well, what's the difference between a marriage chart and a composite chart? Like, aren't they the same thing? No, my friend, they are not. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have been living together for 1,000 years. They refuse to get married. They have children together, they've been cohabitating, they're essentially common law man and wife, but they refuse to make it legal. One of the reasons that they do this is they do not believe that legally getting married is going to do anything except change the relationship for the worse. There are people who have been with each other for a long time, and finally, out of just, I don't know, because it seemed like the right thing to do, after many, many years of peacefully cohabitating with each other and successfully partnering and teaming up and getting through life, decide, yeah, well, let's just make it legal and be done with it. Like, let's do what we're supposed to do, right? And then they get married, they're not married 2-3 years, and the entire relationship falls apart. So, for whatever reason, marriage does change everything. And there's 100 different reasons why psychologically it may have more weight than anything else. But it doesn't really matter. All we need to know is that marriage does change everything. So, a composite chart will show us what the relationship feels like and operates best with as a vehicle. A marriage chart will tell us about how the relationship as a marriage vehicle will now progress. Totally different things. And remember, a marriage chart is a marriage chart. This is two people coming together specifically for the union of two entities, usually to start a family, right? Because it's a very intimate family sort of thing, which is different from a business partnership. Okay, business partnerships, friendships, sibling relationships, these are things you can see in a composite chart. Mother or parent-child relationships. You can see those things in a composite chart. A wedding chart is a birth chart of the marriage. Totally different animal. So, in this chart, yikes, what were they thinking? So, a lot of astrologers looked at the chart, we're all scratching our head going, what on earth? So, the first thing in a marriage chart, just like any other chart, we look at the chart ruler of the chart. The sun, Leo is rising, the sun is the ruler of the chart. The sun is conjunct the fixed star Algol. Yikes! Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar with Algol, Algol is a bit tricky in terms of fixed stars. The fixed star Algol is typically described as losing one's head. That's the Medusa, right? And it is associated with people who are either beheaded or literally lose their ever-loving minds, or hotheads that literally lose their minds and can't control themselves. Hysteria, panic, like all sort of like people freaking out. This is what we get with Algol. And Algol is ruling the chart in the 10th house. So one of the things that we're suspecting with this is this marriage is a very public marriage, and the histrionics that we typically associate with Algol and the losing one's head, as it were, will be a very public event. Now, the other side of Algol, before you all go into panic because you have planets at fixed star, all right? The other side of Algol is Algol has a lot to do with feminine power. So this is because it's Medusa, and Medusa was so powerful that they had to behead her, to keep her under control. There's a whole lot of myth around Medusa. It's good reading if you can get into it. But and also remember too that when these descriptions and assignments were made for these fixed stars, this was a very, very heavily superstitious and patriarchal time, and homosexuality and women were like the two worst things that you could possibly be. And listen, it's 2018, and for some people who still live in caves mentally anyway, like to them being a homosexual woman is still the worst thing you can possibly be. So they're not that far away from medieval times like the Dark Ages. But for those of us living in the modern world, we know that bias absolutely affected the interpretation of these particular fixed stars and the presentation or representation of feminine power. So Algol on the sun in this chart in the 10th house, this has a lot to do with feminine power, and we're gonna circle back to that in a second. All right. Now, the moon represents a couple of things. One, it's the public's reception to us and our marriage. Does the public feel good about our marriage? Do people feel comfortable around us as a married couple? The moon also represents our daily habits, our daily life, how we get along on a day-to-day basis, and it's also the feminine principle in the marriage. The sun would represent the masculine principle. So some people would say the sun is the man, the moon is the woman, but if you have two women or two men that are getting married, it's not that simple anymore. So the sun is the masculine presentation because there's always a masculine solar or dominant partner who is out in the world and handles that stuff. And the moon is the feminine present, the feminine partner. It is the person who is the one with soft skills. It takes care of the nurturing and the safekeeping and the the everyday routines and make sure everybody's on time doing what they need to do. So the moon is in its rulership in Cancer. The moon is extremely strong in this chart. The moon also, I love this, the moon is in a grand trine in water to Jupiter and Neptune. So there really is a lot of love and optimism and tolerance and romance built into this marriage. There's also a tremendous amount of emotional understanding and also a sense that together they are their own emotional island. Like nobody's ever going to understand them the way they understand each other. Or at least that's the way it feels. Now, what's also interesting about this is that not only does the moon make this grand trine, but the moon also now sets up to a kite formation, right? And that kite formation is with Pluto and the vertex. This is interesting. So the thing about it is with a kite formation, there is a sense of fate with this. So, if we take the symbolism of a kite is something that's airborne and it's only held down, connected to us by a string. But essentially it is the spirits or the heavens or nature, that the wings of angels that lift the kite up and keep it airborne and moving. So the kite becomes this intermediary between us and the divine, the cosmos, the nature, the things that are greater than ourselves, the things that we are part of and yet smaller than, okay? So that's where this fated thing comes in when you see kite formations, okay? And in the marriage charts, kite formation suggests that there is a tremendous amount of fate that is playing into this, that is creating this environment for these two people to feel like this marriage is their own island, because this marriage as a vehicle is more than just a marriage for them. This marriage as a vehicle has a much larger significance for everyone around them. So if that is the case, it will be very, very interesting to see what this marriage actually catalyzes or galvanizes or symbolizes or represents moving forward. But there's big stuff, and this marriage is like the symbol or the figurehead for those changes. Okay, and this is well above and beyond, royalty marrying commoners, because there was a royalty. I can't remember the name. A friend of mine would know what it is. If you guys know, put it in the comment section. That abdicated his throne to marry a divorcee. So that's not what this is about. Now, the point of this kite, the nose of this kite is Pluto. Now, what's interesting about this is not only is it Pluto, but it is also conjunct the vertex. And the vertex has absolutely everything to do with things that are larger than us and well out of our control. So talk about the fickle finger of fate. The vertex is a place of compulsiveness, and it is a place that it is a place and a time and a thing we are compelled to participate in, and we have no resistance to it. So when you have vertex contacts with another person in your chart, it's extremely difficult to not participate in a relationship with this person, which can be very bad if that person's toxic or they don't have your best interest at heart or this is a bad relationship. I'm not a fan of vertex relationships because I like having some autonomy and choice in what I'm doing, who I'm dealing with. The vertex takes that choice away from you. You are compelled. You are compelled by the mighty gods that command you. So the vertex is that point of fated compelling that forces you in situations where you literally can't, you don't have choices that you can make because you don't see the choices. You just do what needs to happen as part of this, row of dominoes falling down, kind of thing. Now, Pluto, of course, we also know Pluto has to do with generations and large groups of people, global things. Whenever you have outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, okay, these things always have to do with significance much greater than your personal life. So people who have outer planets that are significant in their charts, they're angular, they're prominent, they're extremely active, at some point in their life, who they are symbolizes, or what they do symbolizes or represents something much larger than their personal stuff. This has everything to do with being the face, the figurehead, or the catalyst for something much larger. It's a difficult thing to have to live with because you don't get a choice in the matter. You know, it's like being a scapegoat. You didn't get a choice in the matter. You just get to be it. So being used as an instrument for something larger than yourself is not always glamorous and fun and applause worthy. Sometimes it's being scapegoated, you know, and that is your contribution because you get to be the symbol of this injustice. So, yeah, that was a happy thought, wasn't it? So those are your outer planets. Pluto in particular has a lot to do with power and the use and or abuse of power. So for whatever reason, this relationship and everything it symbolizes is definitely going to bring to the forefront and catalyze uh, significant issues of power and or the abuse of power, and what's right or wrong for large groups of people on a symbolic level. So it will be interesting to see just exactly what this is. Now, also, too, again, this is kind of interesting, too. This Pluto vertex is falling in that fifth house of children. So I'm wondering if there's something with children or childbirth, um, or love affairs or sex that's not going to come up, or that will come up, that will factor very heavily into the direction this relationship takes on a public level and what it is instrumental for. Because this relationship is above and beyond those two getting married and having kids and falling in love. This relationship, this marriage, according to this marriage chart, symbolizes something else. This is the face of a much more significant thing in the world, and they had to come together to be this entity so that this thing can come to consciousness. And I'm not even going to conjecture what that is. It could be anything. So let's all be surprised and see how that goes. Okay. Um, oh, what was that I was looking at? Right. So there's, oh, right, this one. So here's some other interesting things about this marriage chart. So the other thing that we're all looking at this chart scratching our heads. So we've got Owl, the fixed star on the sun in the very prominent 10th house. We've got this kite formation, right, involving Pluto and the vertex, for God's sakes, right? And as if this wasn't enough. No, because this couldn't be fun enough. We have Venus literally within minutes of changing signs. 2953 Gemini. It's literally minutes from changing signs. Now, Venus rules relationships. Venus rules partnerships. Venus rules aesthetics and values. But definitely relationships. So we're I would never get married with any planet at the 29th degree and 53rd minute of anything. And hopefully the wedding will be delayed so that, well, I guess it would have to be delayed until the next day, so that Venus slides into Cancer. And I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be Venus in those last minutes of Gemini. So, you know, this tells us a couple of things without even getting into the houses yet. So Venus at the 23, 53rd minute, like literally minutes from changing signs, indicates that there is some urgency to this marriage. Like, it's almost as if they're in a hurry. Like, they're in a hurry. So of course, you know, there will be speculation that she's, in this case, because why else would you get married in a hurry, right? You know, that she may already be pregnant. Wouldn't that be a kicker? So that is the possibility. The other thing is that they may be rushing into this far faster than is normal for anybody, and certainly the royal family, and that may be what it is. But again, remember, with this, let me use a different color for this, with this kite formation, okay, this marriage has to happen for reasons much larger than themselves. So that urgency, that blind rush to get married, may have more to do with the divine purpose of this marriage and what it symbolizes than them wanting to be happy and having kids. So that may be where some of this urgency is coming from, like where the cosmos, the universe has it on a timeline, and like trains leave the station and they've got to get on board now because we got places they've got to be. So there is that. Now, Venus rules the 3rd house and the 10th house. Okay, so in a marriage chart, This can also be a couple of things. One, again, this has to do with our reputation and our public standing and what the public sees. And here we've got Jesus. We've got the sun in that 10th house conjunct Algol, which is, people losing their head, hysteria, blind panics. This is not my idea of a great wedding chart. I would have picked a better, more quiet day. So there is the possibility that there's going to be a huge commotion and ruckus that will occur around the time they get married. So there may be people who really feel strongly about this marriage and will try to disrupt it at the time of this marriage. And that may be where Algol, losing one's head, panic, hysteria, and where this Venus at the 29th degree is coming in. Because that would certainly describe that. But hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not. And again, this would be very public, right? It's a very public statement. The other thing is, with the third house being pulled in, if that is the case, this would be man on the street sort of stuff. So this would literally be somebody in the crowds, on the streets, something to do with the vehicles or the local streets and passages, and possibly even during the parade route when they're traveling by parade. So I'm sure they've all thought of this. I cannot believe for a second that they would not have prepared for this, but it is not impossible that some commotion or ruckus will not occur as a result of that. Now, get this in here real quick. In terms of the marriage, separate from that, in terms of the marriage, what this could also mean with Venus ruling that 10th and 3rd house is that, again, this urgency and the communications and schedules and decisions and the direction of this relationship, again, are going to be huge critical factors in this relationship that are going to constantly have this relationship feeling like it's on edge and it could end at any minute. So, relationships, Venus is relationships, and anything at those last degrees, there's always this sense of possible ending, like that any second now it could end and completely change, right? So it is possible things that have to do with public standing and public status and reputations and, public obligation, and also the schedules and routines and communications and the direction a relationship is taking could easily be something that is the thing that constantly has this relationship on edge. And feel like at any second it could get pulled out from underneath them. Now, with that said, okay, so we need more information because that's not enough, right? Because we're just not looking at this Venus, man, of all the times to do this. So Venus is disposited by Mercury. Get back here, my red pencil, okay? Mercury is in Taurus, so this gives it some stability. So this is not a fly-by-night thing. Any sense of perilousness, precariousness that this relationship will feel will take a long time to actually go into effect. So it's not like, she's going to storm out and they're going to get divorced instantly. These are things that take a long time to actually put into action. And the other is failing any aspects with Venus, because Venus is out of bounds and it's not really making any aspects to anything. Like, there's just a whole lot about this relationship because it's just left the sun. So technically it's in a semi-sextile. It's kind of sort of hanging out there, but not really. So technically this relationship is just kind of this weird sort of thing that they're doing, and they're not even really sure why they're doing it. They just feel like they need to do it, and everything, it doesn't matter what their intentions were, everything's about to change literally on a dime almost immediately. So with Venus in those last degrees of a sign, within the year this relationship will have a completely different face on it, and the direction and what this relationship represents will have very, very different meaning than just Harry got married to somebody he loved and trying to start a family. So we won't have long to find out what that's about. Now, some of the other things we can do is we can kind of go back in and look at Mercury, which disposits this Venus, and see what Mercury is doing, right? So Mercury has left a conjunction with Uranus. It is trining Saturn, but it is leaving that as well, okay? And it is leaving square to Mars. So there's a lot of stuff that's already occurred. Oh, here we go, right there. There's a lot of stuff that's already occurred prior to this decision to get married. There's a whole lot of stuff we're not privy to that created a situation where, one, there was an obligation. Look at that Mercury-Saturn trine. There was an obligation to get married because it was the right thing to do. The other is Mars. Long before then, there would have been, I would imagine, that there would have been a major decision and a possible, like, break, even, like an actual forced break to force the decision that would have occurred, because this Mercury would have been with Uranus and Mars at the same time. So this would have been, at that time, like, literally it's a put up or shut up kind of deal, because you don't get to excuse my language, you don't get to half-ass your way through this. Like, you've got to make a commitment one way or the other, which would have involved a break, and then, coming back together, making a decision, which would have led to, okay, let's make this official. See, I'm wondering if she's not pregnant. Okay, all right, so there's that. Now, what's interesting is if you look, right, Mercury is in exact square to the nodes. Now, anytime, typically, it's usually, they say the moon. When the moon's in the degree of the nodes, like, there's a fated event. But we've already covered that there's a lot going on here than just Harry met Meghan and they're getting married. And with Mercury and the North Node at the same degree, regardless of aspect, just being at the same degree, so tight, like minutes away from each other, I'm wondering, again, if this relationship is not larger than just Harry and Meghan got married because they want to have kids. There's something about this relationship that is critically important to everybody else, because the node is involved, and the node has everything to do with being a doorway or gateway to the future, and masses of people that you don't even know. Yeah, interesting stuff. So I personally would never have picked this chart for my own wedding day, but clearly there are forces at work that are making this necessary to get done now, because this blueprint that we're using is the blueprint that they're supposed to be working with. Now, some other things is the moon in this chart is moving very fast. So again, this is moving fast. This marriage, this wedding, all the courtship, all this is moving very fast. Because apparently we're on a timeline. The train is leaving the station and they need to be on it, like, now. The other thing that I thought was interesting is the Venus Pallas conjunction, right? So I don't typically do a lot with the asteroids, mostly because everything I need I can get from the rest of the chart. But with Venus and Pallas, Pallas is the social justice warrior. I thought this was an interesting sidebar. So Pallas is very much the Amazon, the social justice warrior. And where Pallas Athene comes up, typically you see issues of social justice and law and rule of law on a much larger scale, right? So this is very much about doing the right thing in the scale of justice. So with Venus and Pallas Athene together, this really emphasizes this idea or suggestion that this relationship is much larger than just those two. And again, we know, looking at Harry, that he's very much about legacy. He wants to leave something valuable and important behind, right? Now, one of the things about Harry, we're going to do that? No, we're not going to do that. All right, we're going to skip that because we've covered all that, right? And this is, what do we got here? Harry, I know, look at all these charts, right? See, this is why relationship charts are expensive. This is a lot of work. Composite, Harry, where's Meghan? There's Meghan. All right, Venus. We don't have our asteroids in here. Okay, all right. So anyway, let's fast forward through that because we're in here deep. We're in the weeds deep. So finally, some of the other things you can do is you can do a marriage chart, just like a composite, and you can put it up next to the person's individual chart to kind of see how the marriage is going to support or not support the person in question. So in this chart that we're looking at here, the inside ring, this is Prince Harry, and the outside ring is the marriage itself. So we're going to look at how this marriage impacts Harry. So the first thing, I thought this was really interesting. So the Saturn in the marriage chart, look at that, sits dead on Harry's ascendant. So this is literally a rite of passage for Harry that has a lot to do with stepping into the next chapter of his life and fulfilling his obligations as an adult in society. Some people who are very condescending say, oh, well, he's growing up. And I hate when people say that because it's so snarky and condescending and wrong. This is not about growing up. This is about entering the next phase of your life, and it's about taking on responsibilities and obligations as an adult in that phase of your life. this whole thing about growing up implies that you were immature before, you know, and that somehow you magically become an adult when you do this one thing, which is ridiculous. So there. So the other thing is the marriage chart. Look at this. Jupiter is on his Saturn. So Jupiter is a very healing planet. There's a lot of healing and benefit that comes with Jupiter, and a lot of miracles and positive growth that can come with this. Jupiter is retrograde, but that's okay, because what that means is not even a year or so into this marriage, Jupiter will effectively be on his Saturn. A lot of his deepest and worst fears will come to light or fruition or consciousness or actual fruition, right? The actual manifestation, which is not a happy thing. But in this particular case, what this will do is it will allow him to finally put those ghosts to bed and put those traumas to bed and put these things behind him. So he's going to have the opportunity to have a major cathartic experience as a result of this marriage that's going to forever change him into a stronger, more sterling, more powerful person than he already is. And with all this 8th house stuff, don't kid yourself. This guy is a powerhouse. I love his chart. But now he's really coming into place where he's going to be stepping into his own after he puts the things that weaken him as Achilles' heels. He's going to mend those things and put it behind him. So this is a phenomenal thing. I'm so good with this. And here, the the marriage chart Mercury is trining his Mercury in part of fortune. There's a tremendous amount of benefit and a lot of credence or credibility that he's getting as a result of this marriage. So I'm not sure what that's about, but it helps him tremendously. This marriage is extremely beneficial to him. And also the sun in the marriage chart trines his sun. So if he was not being taken serious before or not being regarded as a force to be reckoned with, that is all about change in the best possible way. Excuse me. Because this marriage is just exactly what he needed to step into his power. Now, the moon in the wedding chart opposes his Pluto, so again, there's issues with Meghan and the home life and power plays, and also possibly some scandal. Definitely, these are things that he's going to have to work through, and there's some trauma here. There's some emotional trauma he's going to have to work through. That this marriage is going to catalyze, but he'll get through it because he's an 8th houser, and it will be amazing. It will be amazing. The other thing I want to point out, look at this. He's got Uranus. The marriage chart, Uranus is opposing his Pluto. So again, this suggestion that there's some type of major disruptive shift or awareness in his consciousness that could potentially be extremely traumatic, but also, once he's through it, extremely liberating. So he's being given the opportunity to free himself from a whole lot of past baggage, and also with that it's training his natal Jupiter. This marriage is so important for him on so many levels. I mean, even without her, if she were anybody else, I mean, obviously she could not be because he's supposed to be marrying her, but this marriage in and of itself is such an important vehicle for him and his growth and stepping into his power. This is exciting. We need something to look forward to. But it will not be without a cost. There are certainly issues that are going to go with this that are going to make this quite the bumpy, challenging ride for him. But I have every confidence as a loaded 8th houser, and with Capricorn rising and Saturn and Scorpio, that he's a tough one. He can get through this and come out of this even better than he started. Woo! Okay. So this is the marriage chart for Meghan Markle. All right, so what do we have here? So the sun in the wedding chart is at 28. Is the sun doing anything? Not really. Venus, that 29-degree Venus, what is that doing? It is squaring her moon. Quincunx in Uranus, opposing Neptune, not really doing a whole lot. So the only thing we're showing so far is this awkward position, this Venus thing, right? It's making a wide square to her moon. So again, issues of motherhood and domestic matters, and her expression as a female and a feminine partner, and all these things are going to come up and be challenges for her as she moves into her marriage. So give her about a year, and that's when all this stuff is really going to hit the fan for her, and she's going to have to make these decisions. She's going to have to make these decisions. Let's see. Come on, Megan. This marriage has to be doing something for you. Anything? Anything at all? Good. God Almighty. All right. So this. All right. So we've got the Sun again squaring Jupiter, which is not the easiest aspect to have. So with Jupiter down in that fourth house squaring that first house Sun, this is, again, it's going to exaggerate and magnify all these issues that have to do with identity. And the North Node is near the Sun, so this is very much of a public persona. This marriage is not going to be easy for her by any stretch of imagination. So I don't know. So far, I'm not seeing a lot of happy aspects with this. So we know with this industry, she materially benefits from a relationship with him, but I think this marriage is going to be a lot more challenging for her than anybody realizes. Because this benefits him tremendously, but I don't see her getting from this marriage chart. I don't see her getting a lot of benefit out of this. Oh God! And again, right? So here, the marriage chart with Mercury Uranus squares Mercury and the Sun. And it's wide, but it's still there, and she's still feeling it. And again, coming out of her 10th house. So there is a major disruption and conflict between who she wants to be, who she needs to be, and who she is required to be for public performance and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of tension, a lot of difficulty communicating. She may end up feeling a lot more isolated and alone and lonely. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Than she has ever felt in her life. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. You would think this would be easier, but maybe not. And what else? So the marriage Mars is in her south node. So there are many different ways to look at the nodes. One of the things that I would say is the nodes, especially the south node, has a lot to do with things that we're bringing from the past and also debts that we have to repay. There's a couple of different ways to look at this. With the marriage chart Mars in her south node, this, unfortunately for her, because her south node is in the 7th house, this activates and feeds into all the codependent issues that we saw in her natal chart. So I think the problem and reason this is going to be such an uncomfortable fit for her is she's going to literally be redoing the very thing that she is supposed to be getting out of in this lifetime. Remember, she's not supposed to be about public opinion and having her identity defined by other people and their opinions. Her lifetime, this time around, is supposed to be about her defining herself based on her own self-perception and her own understanding of her essential truth. Mars in this marriage chart activates that south node in Aquarius in the 7th house. So everything about this marriage literally forces her to stay in her south node and abide by 7th house south node Aquarius principles, which is very much public opinion. Yeah, this is going to be a really uncomfortable marriage for her. That is unfortunate. Okay. And the last thing, where was it? Jupiter. Oh, right. Here we go. The marriage Sun opposing her natal Uranus in the 5th. And remember, so her Uranus in the 5th, in her natal chart, is not that big deal. It's just kind of there, right? But in the relationship, in the symmetry with Harry and the composite chart, and certainly now in marriage chart, that Uranus pops up over and over and over again as very, very prominent and a key player in this experience. Now, Uranus is also the dispositor of that south node and that 7th house. So there's more here than meets the eye. One of the challenges with the marriage Sun opposing her natal Uranus is this is going to activate her rebellious need for freedom and her desire to be independent and make her own rules and go her own way and live her own life. So this could play out in a number of ways. And remember, the sun is conjunct Algol, so this may be where this female power and hysteria and losing one's head is kind of coming in. So she may find herself having major meltdowns as a result of this marriage, because it's almost a reaction to needing to be something other than what this marriage will allow her to be. Um, I don't like this. This is not comfortable, and this is not easy, not for anybody. So I'm I'm not confident that this marriage is going to last. Um, However, the marriage will certainly do what it does, and it will take a long time for them to undo this marriage. So it's not like they're going to get married one day and divorce the next. There is also the possibility with that Sun opposing Uranus and her natal fifth, because that is the house of children, that again, issues of children, childbirth, pregnancy, genetic issues, these things could easily be coming up. So whatever weird DNA abnormality, because Uranus is your DNA, and Scorpio is certainly, all that scripting goes back through generations and generations, right? It's the thing we inherit. It could be that there's some weird anomaly with her genetics that pop up the minute she's pregnant and shows up in the kid. But we don't know. It could be him too. We don't know. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. But either way, this is going to be not the happiest of experiences. It will be an important one, but not the happiest or most joyous. So that will be interesting to see as well. So this, my friends, has been this has been the analysis of the composite charts, as well as the wedding chart for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And the synastry chart. So I'm hoping you enjoyed this, and I'm going to go ahead and post this. And if you have any questions, feel free to put stuff in the comment section. If you're interested in relationship reading, please send me an email. I'll try and post rates somewhere else. But do be mindful, these are not cheap, because this is a lot of work. And I will try to put together some cheaper stuff for you if you guys are just testing waters with new relationships. You want to see what your chances are with that sort of stuff. So if you enjoyed any of these videos, please like and subscribe, and definitely leave me some feedback in the comment section if you enjoyed it, because this is always good. In the absence of financial sustenance, mental sustenance, and confirming that I've done a good job for you guys is also very helpful as well. All right, so we'll talk to you later. Bye.